The advancement is, I will copy this first. Let me copy this. Copy, and I will use it again here. Okay. Now, what is the advancement in this method? The advancement is following: that okay, there is one thing missing, the bar of division. Okay, the advancement is that here at this point you multiply this with 4 and then you divided it by weight 1. Here also what you do, that you multiply it with 4 and divided it by weight 2. This one here, let me try to write it properly. So how I can write properly is that I will cut this out and I will relocate it like this. Same for this one. Okay, and let's move all of this little bit down. Okay, now what you do, there is some modification in this formula. Sometimes that modified form is also used, that you multiply it here with 4 divided by weight of 1, and same thing you do here, you multiply it with 4 divided by weight of 2. What you do here is you multiply it with 4 divided by weight of 3, and what you do here is that you multiply it with 4 divided by weight of 4. Now what are these weight 1, weight 2, weight 3, weight 4? So all these weight are as following. All of them weight I will be 1 plus 2 times of 1 plus 1, okay, which will be equal to 4. For I is equal to 1 to 4. Okay, but for no data, if one of the cell value is no data, so that cell, for that particular cell, your factor will become, this factor will become 0. I'll explain that by example. Suppose this is my window, 3x3 window. This is Z0, this is Z1, Z2, Z3, Z4, Z5, Z6, Z7, Z8. Suppose I want to calculate slope in the x direction. So for calculating slope in the x direction, what I will do, I will consider this cell and these cells, okay? And suppose I have this z1 as no data. So in this case, how my formula will become? And also suppose that z4 is also no data. Suppose only these two are no data. So in the formula, this cell, weight of this cell, and the weight of the first cell is weight 1, while the weight of this cell is weight 2, okay? And you know that weight 2 is equal to 1 plus 2 times of 1 plus 1, okay? This one represents z4, this one represents z1, this one represents z6, okay? So because z1 is no data, so this factor will become what? This factor will become 0, okay? And z4 is no data, so this factor will become 0, and z6 has value, so it will become like this. So what will be my weight 2? So my weight 2 will become only 1, okay? And suppose I have values in z3, z5 and z8, so they will have this factor, okay? So it will remain just like before, that it will be equal to 1 plus 2 times of 1 plus 1, which will become 4. So in the formula, if you use this formula, so for the first part in the x direction, this will become 4 divided by 1. This one, the first one will become 4 divided by 4, okay? Minus the second one will become 4 divided by, this one will become 4 divided by 1, okay? So that's how weights are working. So an inside value, this will be also some value, this will be z6, this will be 0, and this one will be 0. So what will happen here? What happened here is that this z6 will be multiplied with 4, okay? Its weight will be considered as more. So this is one thing which ArcGIS is doing, and this is another way of tackling with no data. And this processing require that in the neighboring seven of the cells should have values, okay? Seven of the cells should have valid values. And if 7 of the cell do not have the valid values, the output of that particular cell will be no data, okay? and the output in this method for edge cell will be no data. So there is another way of tackling with the calculation. So one way of tackling with no data is to replace the value of the center cell as I have discussed here. Okay, and for that we use this formula. Okay, the other way is to use the weighted, this formula with weights. Okay, and in this weights, if any of the cell has no data, for example here you have Z1 and Z4 is no data, so in this case what happens is that your weight will be adjusted for it, and the calculation will be performed. And there is another limitation that at least 7 cells should have valid data, otherwise the result will be no data, and in case of edges the result will be always no data. So this is another way of making these calculation. So this is method 2 in the 8 cell method. One thing more about no data, that if the center cell has no data, so resultant slope will be also no data. So this should be clear about the center cell, that the processing cell or center cell, if the, I will write that here, if the center cell is no data, then output of the slope is and if the cells are less than 7 cells, the calculation is not performed and the result is also no data. So this is a general rule. Okay, so in this method the outermost rows and column of the raster will have no data, which I have explained, in which you have these weights. Okay, but there is a way out of this, that you do thing as I've explained, and you don't use weight. Okay, and you use the center cell value. This method is formulated, this formulation in which you have weight, this is part of the spatial analyst and 3D analyst set. Okay, it is available in 3D analyst toolbox, in surface tools of the ArcGIS. Okay, this one, in which you have weights and you have a condition of 7 cells. Okay, and edge cell with no data. This is in 3D analyst toolbox surface tool set of the ArcGIS. Okay, whereas this method and having simple formula with no weights, this is the general slope calculation formula. Okay.